This episode is being brought to you in part by Veeva Systems. Veeva connects patients, sites, and sponsors on a single technology ecosystem to make clinical trials easier and faster. Look, you guys know I've been talking about Veeva Site Vault for some time. If you want just a little bit of a taste of what Site Vault includes, go check out the recent live stream I did with Bree Burks of Veeva. It's available on Note to File Podcast YouTube, as well as notetofilepodcast.com. But look, ultimately, Veeva saves you so much time, reduces the numbers of systems and logins you have to use. More than 4,500 sites are using Site Vault. There's over 400 industry sponsors also using Veeva clinical applications. It's kind of insane, the amount of clinical trials that are run on Veeva. It's about 65%. Look, that's a ton of site sponsors and trials. The best part is Site Vault is completely free for sites to use. To learn more about Veeva Site Vault, go check out sites.veeva.com today. This episode is also being brought to you in part by Real-Time CTMS, a leading provider of innovative software solutions for clinical trial research sites, site networks, sponsors, and CROs. Real-time systems allow users to manage complex clinical research processes with powerful user-friendly interfaces that are revolutionizing how research gets done. Head on over to realtime-ctms.com and complete one of their contact forms for a free demo. Hello and welcome to Note to File Podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower. Our guest this week is Kate Shaw. Kate's the founder and CEO of Innovative Trials, a global patient recruitment organization. Kate has over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and patient recruitment industry while working in clinical operations and patient recruitment positions. Kate's a vocal advocate for quality, diversity, and inclusion in clinical research, as well as meaningful community engagement that puts patients and sites at the heart of clinical research. This week, we discuss awareness versus education, the challenges of physician referrals, and the importance of true community outreach. So without further ado, Kate Shaw. All right, welcome to Note to File, Kate Shaw. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Brad. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Where are you at?
So I'm Kate. I'm the founder, CEO of Innovative Trials. We're based out of the UK, and we're a global patient recruitment specialist.
Nice. Yeah, we were talking before. I'm envious that you're already at the end of your Friday.
Yeah.
I'm just now starting mine. So
absolutely, just slightly ahead of you.
Yeah, very cool. I like to jump in just like I always do with all my guests here. I think it's always kind of fun to hear about people's backgrounds, what brought them into the clinical trial space. I know you've been at it for a while. And again, I think it can be very instructive kind of hear how people got where they are. So if you would, kind of walk us through your origin story in clinical trials and kind of to where you are today, if you would.
Sure, absolutely. I think probably like most people, I kind of fell into clinical research. My initial career choice and what I did actually at the beginning, I used to work for the European Commission. I worked in Indonesia as a managed development aid projects in Indonesia for 3 years. I came back to the UK to do a master's degree in health promotion, and my plan was to go back and do more development aid work overseas. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. I needed a job. My flatmate worked for a pharmaceutical company and told me about clinical research and said that, you've got a science degree, Kate, how about you give that a go? So I applied for the job and that was that. So I started as a CRA, worked for a long time for Roche in kind of development projects, and then lastly in patient recruitment. And for me, patient recruitment is the most exciting, interesting, challenging part of clinical research. So when I had the chance to do it full time, I totally jumped in it and I've never looked back. So that's my very whistle-stop story of how I got to what I'm doing today.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I work at sites, and without patient recruitment, there's really the doors don't stay open, right? No. And I talk to a lot of young sites about this kind of stuff, and it can be exciting to get a new PI, it can be exciting to land a study opportunity, but at the end of the day, none of that really matters unless you find participants for trials, right? So, there are certainly, it's becoming a more crowded space, I think, in terms of, recruitment companies and what have you. So what is your guys' model? Sort of what does that look like? Do you work primarily with sponsors and CROs, or do you work with sites directly?
A bit of everything, actually. So our clients tend to be sponsor and CRO, but we work a lot with sites. So we work with sites directly to facilitate proactive recruitment. We're there to help the sites. We're there to give them recruitment ideas, to motivate them, and really there as help for them. So it's paid for by the sponsor, which is great. And so, we're there to help the sites kind of develop their referral networks and really kind of motivate them and represent the patients in some ways as to why this trial would be good for patients and what sort of patients would do well, and maybe what sort of patients wouldn't do so well in certain trials. So really to ensure that, we're really thinking about who we're trying to recruit and why, for the benefit for the patient and also obviously for the benefit of the trial too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, well, it kind of gives me two questions before I get too far ahead of myself. Do you find sites are sort of weary about like more centralized campaigns? Again, a lot of sites I talk to, you hear if there's a central campaign being put on by a sponsor or CRO, you kind of get some eye rolling and some sighs, and that you might end up with maybe not the best quality leads. Do you feel like that's still the case, or do you think that's something that's sort of improving across the industry?
I think it is still the case, actually. A lot of the patients come through referrals, maybe, not as what the sites are wanting. What we're actually doing is working with a service, we're actually running our own service called Patient Navigator, where we're actually working to kind of second screen patients as well, so that we can, they'll pass the initial screening, but really kind of talk to them, again, understanding, making sure they understand the commitment, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, because I think it's so easy for patients to kind of respond to these ads either online or newspapers or wherever they see them. But actually, when you think about the whole commitment of the trial, it's big, and they really need to consider it with for themselves and for their families. And so that's something that we're starting to get into again, with the idea that once a patient goes through to the site, we've done a lot of work on for the site, and we're really making sure that yes, this patient is going to really do well on the trial and it's going to be a good trial participant for you. So it's obviously it's a two-sided relationship, and that's what we need to make sure that everyone understands what their kind of commitment is and the expectations, and ultimately what's going to happen to them over that duration of time.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, we've been oftentimes a little apprehensive about central campaigns, but I will say the ones that have worked the best are the ones that have some sort of, like, to your point, second layer of screening or pre-screening, I guess, where, the patients coming through tend to be a little more qualified, a little more aware, again, of what to expect. I think it's funny. A lot of people seem to think like, well, just put out ads and patients are going to come in the door, and that is not the case, right? That's even just identifying potential patients is really feels like the first step. There's a big sort of learning curve for the patients, right? I mean, it can be challenging.
Yeah, I think there's good things about recruitment campaigns there as well, because it does broaden out the opportunity to more patients, and maybe patients who've never even heard what trials are. So when we are trying to have more diverse patients in trials, open the trials up to everybody, I think there's good options on that too. Part of the problem with sites is that if you're not linked to that site, how do you find out about the trial? And so, having advertising campaigns, I think, is great for that. But again, if we're working with patients who never heard about trials or have got a low knowledge of what a clinical trial is, again, there's a lot of work we need to do with them to make sure that they're understanding what it is and ultimately what it isn't too. So we can kind of get away and educate kind of those, some kind of preconceived ideas of what a trial is. It has got its place, and I think it's something we need. We just have to make sure that we're kind of doing the add-on work with the patients too, not expecting they're going to be a fully fledged clinical trial participant really from answering one little ad that is taking them like 30 seconds to do. So I think it's that education piece that we need to work on generally, but definitely with people who answer on the adverts as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I see that at the site level, it's sort of like twofold, right? I mean, to your point, just awareness is one thing, and then education is another. And at some point, I'll dive in a little bit more about how sites operate. But I found, just because a patient doesn't qualify for your study, it doesn't mean click goodbye. I mean, still laying that foundation for, creating awareness and educating, because again, now they may be comfortable next time a study opportunity comes around. And that's not always maybe apparent, especially to people at the site level where under such pressure to sort of turn around patients and go. And as you know, like for better or worse, sites don't get paid for engaging patients if they don't qualify for your trial. But ultimately, it's still better for, the bigger picture and for the longer term to really take the time to educate, even if the patient doesn't fit today.
No, it's definitely. I know it takes a lot of time, and so I can see that being as a as a challenge for the sites. But we want them to go away with a positive experience. Certainly, whatever has happened, that they're part potentially a future trialist, or they're going to speak to people. And so, if we can ensure they've had a nice experience, they've learned something, that people have been very respectful towards them, then ultimately they'll consider trials in the future, and obviously kind of that spread the good word. So we all know that clinical trial awareness is really so low. And so if we've got somebody who's kind of come in naive to clinical trials, there's a lot of benefit we can give them to then go away with that education and share those with their family and friends.
Yeah, and again, I think sometimes it's not always top of mind. Again, if it's a bad experience in that first phone call, then you may have basically turned somebody off to the idea of clinical trials forever, right? And we've already got a major problem with awareness and participation. So again, it can be very short-sighted not to continue to do that. And it kind of leads me to a question about sites. I mean, I've been aware of the fact that sometimes sites don't handle their referrals or their advertising referrals very well. Oftentimes they're very strapped for time and going quickly. So waiting days to call a patient back can be the difference between, again, engagement and never hearing from that patient again. What sorts of maybe tips would you give to sites to help better manage their referrals that come in from advertising?
It is kind of contacting the referral people as quickly as possible, but it's a time element, isn't it, that kind of comes into it. And so, really working on recruitment, whatever that is, a little bit every day. It's, recruitment is an intensive process. It's hard work, but trying to make sure that people find that little bit of time every day to do that. And again, like you said, with the referrals, we can't leave these people waiting, because their interest is going to go down and down, and ultimately they're going to could be quite angry. I've offered my time, I want to be in this trial, and nobody could be even bothered to call me back. So we don't want to leave people waiting. And so it is taking the time, and I do accept time is very precious, but trying to take the time to actually call these people. And even if it's a case of calling them and saying, look, I'll ring you back tomorrow, I've only got 5 minutes, but literally kind of keep them engaged and keep them interested in the trial. So maybe there's even actually information they could send them, ahead of time to say, have a think, we need you to read this information, this is what the trial's all about. I'll ring you tomorrow to see if you're still interested, something like that, but to buy them time, but to keep the patients engaged throughout that whole process. And that's what we're finding again with the Navigator service, that the questions that we're being asked by the patients are probably something that we'd never expect. But we've been in clinical research for a long time, and we've probably thought these things years ago. But for these people, it's the first time in clinical research, so there's a lot of questions that we do need to answer to make sure they're confident in their decision, really. So it is time, it is taking the time, but the results are definitely worth doing, and getting people on side with the site, getting people actually seeing the site is something where it's a good experience. It's back to that, really, just giving it a little bit of time every day, I'd say, rather than saying, I'll do that next week, try and do it today, and just 15 minutes just to get through some of the people that are coming through.
Yeah. And, something you point out that wasn't always that obvious to me until, you spend a lot of time on the phone talking to patients, is that, some patients are reaching out because they don't have any other options, or they've exhausted their options, or they're living with chronic pain, and maybe they've even been, let down by the healthcare system in some ways. So it can be extremely important, again, just to take the time, like you said, just reach out, get them on the phone, engage with them, let them know that, you're not ignoring them or letting them down, because again, a lot of them will get excited by the opportunity. And if we don't take that 15 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes a day you spend making phone calls, that could really be the difference in some people's lives. And again, I think that goes sometimes really, unnoticed.
Yeah, that's true. We sometimes forget as well, obviously, all patients they've got family and they've got friends. And so, making a decision to go into a clinical trial isn't just the patient's decision. In a lot of cases, it's actually their friends or their family. And so I think the better we educate the patients on the trial, when they've got friends and family saying, "Oh no, don't do that," they're more confident in their decision because they have the information to say, "No, I'm doing this because," or "I'm not doing this because." It's a wider community that we're educating by educating one person. And so there might be people then they're speaking to actually saying, "Oh, you've changed my view on clinical research. I didn't realise it was as it is." So, it's one person we're speaking to on the phone, but we don't know who they're speaking to in a wider context. There's a huge benefit to it. And I think back to kind of the education of the patients when they go in the trials, by taking that time, they are more informed, they are more educated, and they are more understanding of what the trial, what will happen over the next kind of, could be potentially years, that they've decided to be in part of that trial. So,
and I think, again, for a while, I sort of underestimated the potential downstream or, domino effect of actually taking the time to engage, because to your point, maybe they don't qualify,
yeah.
but maybe their neighbor or their someone else in their family. And if you give them a good experience they feel good about, they're going to be a lot more likely to be able to explain that, refer that patient. And I've seen it happen, time and time again, where it may feel like the call's not really going anywhere or the patient's not going to qualify, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But you still take the time, and ultimately it may have some sort of, again, return further down the road beyond just general awareness.
I agree.
So when I think about patient recruitment, obviously there's some obvious things like, EMR and, patients coming in the door if you're integrated within a clinic. But a lot of times I think about social media. Well, that's not necessarily all there is, right? What other sorts of approaches do you guys take? Or, in working with sites, what other sorts of approaches would you consider?
We want to look at it as kind of as broad a sense as possible. So we tend to, when we're working with sites, obviously looking at the patients that they've got on their database. And so, that's it's the people that they know, and they know, like I said, whether the patient will do well. But then working with sites is to, develop referral networks. And so, who else can refer patients in? So we work with the sites to develop a list of potential referral doctors, nurses, sites. And then we will take that on behalf of the site. So actually going out and talking to the referral doctors about the trial, about the site, about how they can recruit patients, or refer patients into the site. So referral doctors are a good source of kind of broadening the network of patients around the site. Patient groups, so patient advocacy groups are a great option. And I think there's more we can do with patient advocacy groups. And to be honest, there's more we should do with them. They are representing the patients that we wish to recruit. And so, we've worked on programs where we've actually contacted all the national patient advocacy groups. More as information, actually. And I also feel it's a bit of a courtesy that if we're running that trial in their country, I think there's a courtesy element to actually call them and actually notify them about the trial is running in their country. Again, like a few years back, we were working on the multiple sclerosis trial, and we were contacting all the national advocacy groups. We actually contacted one of the advocacy groups, and they'd had a patient who'd come to them and said, I've been recommended to go on this trial. Basically, what do you think? The patient advocacy group, one, hadn't been informed about the trial, but two, they weren't aware of what placebo meant. And actually, that in this trial, that all the patients were either they were given active or the gold standard and or placebo to match it up. And so the fact that the word placebo was mentioned, and the patient advocacy group said, don't go on this trial because you're not getting active medication. They were getting active, but it was like I said, either the IP or the gold standard. And so we were able to work with that patient advocacy group to explain, actually, the patient is still getting active treatment. You don't need to worry about that. But it was their kind of misunderstanding of the trial meant that patient then went away. If we'd have got in early and we'd spoken to them and told them about the trial and told them what sort of patients we were looking for, that patient could have been on the trial. And this could have been the best thing ever for this patient to be on this trial. And so unfortunately, they then missed out. And so I think patient advocacy groups is a great option, and they want treatments for their patients too. And so, they tend to be on, wanting to hear about the clinical trials that are taking place. So, so patient advocacy is a great option. We also do a lot of community outreach, and so actually going out into the community again. people or patients are walking around into the community, to actually go into, especially if we're trying to recruit diverse populations, going out into diverse places. We've done studies where we've actually gone out to talk to barbers. Actually, barbers have been kind of, community leaders and people that people respect in the community, to speak to barbers about the trials and again, the patients we wanted to recruit. We've been out to skate parks. We were looking for adolescents. We actually went to skate parks to talk about trials. And so I think it's just talking to as many people as you can. Again, I know for science this takes a lot of time, but for some studies it makes sense to invest that time to do that. So I think it's working like broad and wide. Educational materials, again, are important. Back to kind of our conversation about family and friends, that if they're given information either electronically or physically, they've got something then to share with their family and friends to explain kind of the trial that they're considering being part of. So it needs to be 360. I think there's no one recruitment strategy that works for any study. It's really thinking, how can we get the information out? Who are the patients? What is going to be important to them? So it's really thinking 360 about the patients and the information they need to know, and ultimately where they are.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that can be challenging, to your point, for sites who, again, maybe don't have the time or staff. Staffing has been an issue across some sites, and it can be challenging to get out there on your own, even though, to your point, I really think if you're a site, you sort of have to stand back and realize it's a long game. Again, you're not just gonna push out, an ad or go to one event and then get 100 patients, right? It's going to be a long grind, and it's an investment in your community too, right? I mean, that's why a lot of us have done these things by setting up sites and working with physicians in the communities that we live, because, we want to make that investment, but sometimes it's easier said than done. And I want to go back and pull on a little bit of a thread you mentioned about referral networks and setting up referral, type of relationships with physicians. This is something I feel like I've struggled with. I've seen other sites struggle with, because, even if you can get in the door and engage with a physician or group, it can be challenging to sort of keep them on the hook. They sometimes don't want to send their patients away, even though they may be otherwise altruistic. They may not want to see their patients walk out the door.
Yeah.
And go to, a clinical trial. Have you seen any general practices that seem to sort of help or be particularly beneficial when it comes to setting up referral networks?
It can be tough. And I think if you look at the States and look at a lot of the sites are private sites and private doctors, and that obviously they don't want to lose their patients. We have seen it succeed in the States as well, especially if it's kind of complex patients and kind of their initial doctor hasn't got the access to, obviously, to the trial or to the potential, future medications for the patient. So it can work, but it does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, because again, it's not a kind of a one and done thing. You have to go back. You have to, for the referral doctor, this isn't their primary job. They've got their primary job to do as well. For some of them, a lot of them, they're not getting any financial incentive, and so it's an ongoing conversation with the referral doctors to do that. Outside of the States, it can work maybe a little bit easier because you haven't got the kind of finance side of it, or the loss of the finance side to worry about. But I mean, we find that we'll go talk to referral doctors, we'll give them information about the trial, and like I said, there's some that will actively engage with the process and some actively won't. So again, when we're working with the sites, we would ask them who in their area they think would be a good option. We'll do our own research anyway and kind of come to the table with new names and new places. But if they've already got doctors or sites that they've got relationships with, it's definitely a lot easier. They know the PI, they know kind of how the patients will be treated. So that's a little bit easier, but we're happy to do the legwork. And actually, we do have some success, but I wouldn't say it's 100% because there's different reasons why people want to refer and people not want to refer.
Yeah, that's fair. And I can see why that would be an advantage of partnering and working with someone like you guys, because I do think, again, generally speaking, even in a otherwise like competitive financial environment, physicians still want to do what's best for their patients, right? But I do think you have to make it incredibly easy for them. Yeah, you can't make it burdensome, and because to your point, there's really no financial incentive. They're not going to necessarily jump through a ton of hoops. So you've got to really provide that
Don't make it easy.
help. Yes, exactly. And again, that can be challenging for a site who's otherwise, busy trying to actually just see patients and deal with monitors and all the other things we do. But being able to partner with someone like you guys, again, that's where those kind of things make a lot of sense.
It does, and it can work well, like in hospitals. And so, if you're working on a breast cancer trial and there's 5 doctors who look after breast cancer patients, that could be a good option to kind of more work in the hospital setting, because they're in the same institute, and so we can kind of tap on every door who will be looking after these patients. So it could be going to talk to the people who run the lab, it could be pharmacy, it could be accident emergency, it could be reception. And so actually, because they're all part of the institution, that does make it a little bit easier. And as we know, these institutions are huge, and so the communication is not always that good. So our job is to kind of remind or inform or educate the other parties about the trial, and to say, Dr. Smith is running a trial for breast cancer. These are the sort of patients we're looking for. So even though you think it would be easy because they're colleagues, that everyone's busy, aren't they? And everyone's got their own kind of patient list to work to. They haven't got the time or energy to think about, well, maybe I should tell my other colleagues. So we can kind of ensure that it's discussed at MDT meetings, so that everybody is kind of aware of the trial and it's in the institution, rather than kind of expecting from kind of outside the institution. It's much easier if we can do that. So again, that's kind of going to the hospitals, walking around and literally talking to people. So it's back to education, but it's kind of open up those communication channels within the hospital or institution to say, look, you guys are doing this anyway. So if we see any patients that kind of match this criteria, it'd be amazing if we could get those kind of patients where they need to be. Well, it's really, really hard is when it's time constraints. And so if you've got a patient who's had a stroke and they have to be treated within 30 minutes, that's really hard, and makes it even more important where we have to open these doors really early and make sure that if the patient comes into the ER, straight away they're referred to the stroke clinic, because there isn't the time to waste. So that's really important then, to have that kind of proactive work ahead of time, so that we're not losing patients, and ultimately we're giving the patients this opportunity to go in the trial. It'd be a shame if lost that opportunity down to time, or down to an intervention that meant they were no longer eligible. So there's a lot of internal institution work we can do as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think, today I'm talking to you from within an institution that we work. It's a large hospital system. There's a medical group. It's spread out all across the state that we live in. And I think it's not dissimilar from the other types of interactions. I think you can really spread general awareness. I've been in institutions where half the institution doesn't even know research might be available. I think people would be shocked by. I've been in places that have had research groups working with them for a decade, and half the staff still doesn't know research opportunities exist. So I think it's really important not to sort of underestimate how important that can be, because to your point, everyone's busy. Yeah. Everyone lives in their own little world sometimes, and that stuff, although we take for granted, might be apparent. And oftentimes, it's just not. So again, that's sort of the low hanging fruit. And to your point, it's good for the institution. It's already kind of a built-in incentive for everybody to play along, right? You're not having to sort of prove why it's good for everybody, because it's all feeding the same, whatever it is, group, medical group, institution, whatever the case may be.
I think it's a good option, and I think we all assume it happens anyway, but it doesn't, and it's like there's nobody's fault at all. It just doesn't happen. And so if it's somebody's job to do it, it will happen. It just takes time, it takes effort, but yes, you're right, it absolutely benefits the whole institution. And so if we can get more trials into that institution, that's great. That's what we want. That brings a lot of opportunities for the staff who work there, obviously for the patients who go to. So it benefits everybody, really.
Yeah. Again, I love that you pointed that out, because again, I think even that can be overlooked fairly easily sometimes when it's right in front of your face, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you talk about too working with community members, especially within communities that may not be well served or well educated about clinical trials, or have the opportunity to participate in trials. And we talk a lot about the lack of diversity in clinical trials. But again, to go back to the same sort of theme, it's a long game and it requires a true investment in those communities, which means working with, the community members, not just hammering them with advertisements, right? It's having those conversations. And maybe, to your point, again, a great thing you point out is, maybe I'm not the guy to go in and engage directly, but if you can work through already, trusted people within the community, it's sort of I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it makes so much sense intuitively. And I love that we're seeing more fairly successful for you guys. Have you seen that be well received?
It's well received. I don't think it's been done as often as it should really, and I think it's probably back to the fact that this is a long term thing, like you said. This is we don't want to go into communities and then never appear again, because how are they going to trust? How's anybody going to trust anybody if they don't have that kind of long term relationship? So it's working with communities and institutions on a long term basis, so that ultimately they trust. It's back to that education. That's clinical trial awareness is quite low, and so we had one program where literally we're just going into communities and talking about clinical research, not any trial specifically. It's just, what is a trial? How is it? And then kind of giving people the chance just to ask any question about a trial, because it's back to that clinical trial 101. We can get that sorted, and then when we if people happen to become a patient or their family becomes a patient, they've got that knowledge to know what a trial is, and we've taken away the kind of fear factor. So I think it's great to go into all different areas and just let people ask. You can ask whatever you want to ask me about clinical research, and I'll tell you honestly how it is and how it isn't. And that's it. It takes away that sort of scariness about them. It's just lack of knowledge really kind of makes you nervous. And I think there's things in the past that have happened that people haven't been treated as well as they should have been. And so we're trying to, look to the future and kind of make it much more inclusive than it has been in the past, really.
Well, and I think it does. There's probably something to be said about the people, in and serving that community, to be the ones helping have those conversations, whether they be, again, a community member, even the sites who are there, helping the communities and having transparent and open conversations, right? Not, pre-approved pharma marketing necessarily, but having real conversations. And I think it's something you point out that, again, I think is really kind of under the radar is like, look, not just showing up when you need a study enrolled, but actually having an ongoing conversation about clinical trials in general, and maybe even broader than that, maybe even, healthcare and access and things like that are obviously have huge effects on, not just the community, but clinical trial participation and all sorts of different things. That's where I wonder too, though, is that again, pharma, oftentimes when they come to a site, it's for a project. They're not giving you money or time to go, invest in having broader conversations, which is probably a mistake. I think if that were a little more less short-sighted, then you'd see, an irony is you would have better return for pharma too.
That would be nice. You wonder whether it's worth asking the question is, would pharma give you money per study to do community outreach and go and talk to different groups? I don't know. It'd be nicer, wouldn't it?
Some seem open to it. Obviously they want to see it tied to the study, and they usually want to see some kind of, metrics that say, well, okay, we gave you this much money to go talk to people. What did you get out of it? How many patients screened? Which, I get they need to have some sort of, I guess, justification for doing it. But if you're a pharma company and you're shouting about diversity, go support helping increase diversity. Go do it. Put your money where your mouth is and work with these, whether they be sites or community leaders or both, like no one's stopping you. No one's stopping you from doing it. So, if you want to talk about it, then, let's do it.
Yeah. The more of it, the better, really, isn't it? Because it's like any marketing message, you've got to be kind of told these things how many times before you act on it. And I think it's a bit the same with the clinical trial education. The more you hear about it, the more it becomes normal, the more that you consider it. Whereas the first time, it's so easy to say no, I'm not doing that, just because you don't know kind of what you're saying yes to, really. So the more ways that we can kind of get this information out, and the more people that talk about clinical research in a very normal way, suddenly becomes very normal. I know. I was on a trial last week. It's fine. Everyone, it's just kind of part of life. And when patients are presented the opportunity in the future to be on a trial, they can come into it with a lot of knowledge rather than the little knowledge that some people have at the moment.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you're giving them the arms to be able to come in prepared and not and make better decisions for themselves. Ultimately, I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, they have to be able to make that decision with the information that's given to them, and all we can do is give them as much information as they need to make those decisions, and if they don't have it, then they're not well informed enough to make it, and it's not their fault. I mean, nobody's taking the time to do that.
Not at all. And in a lot of circumstances, people deciding no from an informed point of view is absolutely valid. That is the right decision for them. And I think that's how we kind of approach education. We want to provide information or education to so they can make an informed decision. And their informed decision, whatever that is absolutely the right thing. If they say yes, that's great. If they say no, that's great too, because it's from an informed point of view. I think it's when it's not informed, that's when it's a shame that people are saying no because they weren't informed and they were just kind of scared, or they didn't really understand what was being asked of them. So I remember my dad actually received a consent form through the post for a trial, and that's the first he heard about. It was a consent form through the post. Well, straight away it was no, because nobody rang him, nobody explained what it was, and the information in the consent form was actually very scary. And so even though my dad knew about clinical research, because he unfortunately had to listen to me talking a lot, he still said no, because there was no personal interaction with that trial or that trial site. It was just, do you want to do this trial sort of thing? And that's not good enough. We need to ensure that people have that information to make an informed decision, rather than just kind of being scared by something that arrives in the post to them.
Yeah, and again, to that point, I mean, even stuff I see can feel a little scammy at times. Again, even that, if I received a consent form in the mail that I hadn't reached out about, I'd be a little bit like, whoa, this raises a bunch of questions. Like, why are they sending this to me? Now I feel like I immediately come from a place of not trusting why I've even received this in the first place, which is, again, really unfortunate, because you're sort of like poisoning the well for the future, because, now they're going to always be a little bit like, well, I don't know where this came from, who sent it to me, why they sent it to me. It's very impersonal.
It is. It was so impersonal, and I was quite sad actually to see that happen, because it's like all the work that we're trying to do, and then these things still happen. It's like, oh.
Again, to your point, I think we also just have to recognize that, look, some people are going to be informed and still not want to participate. I've been working it's been 15 years I've been working in clinical trials, and we had an opportunity to put my young son in a Moderna trial. And even I was really back and forth on it for a long time. Some people are never going to trust pharma, no matter what you do. We ended up putting him in the trial and everything went great. But again, it's just, to your point, I hate to see those decisions come from wrong assumptions or just wrong information or lack of information at all. And there's no reason that it has to be that way.
Absolutely. No. And you see for yourself what a huge decision it is to put your child in a trial, isn't it? It's huge.
Yeah.
And you come from you're very educated about trials. You've seen loads and loads in operation, but it's still a big decision, and that's and so it kind of, in some ways, it grounds us all when that happens, because you realise that you're suddenly in the same shoes as the participants or the patients of the trials, isn't it? Rather than being kind of on the other side of the desk, changes it around.
This may not be the greatest endorsement of clinical trials, but even I, to this day, anytime a patient agrees to enroll in a trial, I'm always a little surprised. I mean, that sounds weird, and not even like, I'm not like shocked, but I'm always like, wow, like all that time spent educating and considering and going through and seeing the burden they're going to have to potentially deal with, and having to travel here, and then maybe getting a placebo, and all those things. They have to take a day off of work to get here. They got to get care for their child maybe to come. And every time someone agrees, I'm like, wow, with all that stuff, they're still willing. I guess that's a positive thing. It's great, that people are willing to do that. And that's why their participants are so important. But even as long as I've done this, every time it happens, I'm like, wow.
It's great. And it's so we do need to raise a profile of like clinical trial participants, and that people see them as medical heroes. Back to they're all our futures, and so people who go into trials should really be congratulated and thanked and massively appreciated for what they're doing, because it is huge, and it's a big decision for them. And so I think about trials and people that go in them, and it's massive respect for people that do it, because like you say, it could cost them money, it's taking their time, and ultimately they're putting their trust and faith in us that we're running trials that are ethically run, and ultimately we're worried about their safety. So they should be seen as medical heroes, and we should all be massively thanking them for what they're doing.
I could not say it better. Well, Kate, where can people find you online?
So have a look at Innovative Trials. So innovativetrials.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. And you know what? I love clinical research. I love patient recruitment. And so, I'm always happy to chat to people about patient recruitment and ultimately how we can help. I think that's why I do my job. I love what we do, and I think we're improving things for the future. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, that would be amazing.
Okay, we'll make sure I'll post your contact info in our show notes. And anything else before we sign off here?
It's been great chatting to you, Brad. Thank you for your time. Thanks for the conversations, and let's keep the discussion going. And like I said, always here to help on clinical research. If there's any trials you need help with, just give me a shout. I'm always happy to have a chat.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Kate.
No worries. Take care.
As always, thank you so much for listening to Note to File Podcast. Make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com. Make sure to check out our weekly live streams on YouTube and LinkedIn. Thanks so much for listening, guys.